What's going on, guys? Welcome to another episode of Bro History. It's Henry Zamota and Danny Abdeljabbar. What's up, man?
Chilling as per usual, man. How about yourself?
I'm doing pretty good. Pretty good. I have a good follow-up subject to our last show.
Oh, okay. Hit me.
So we were talking about um, the U.S. military recruiting kids from Twitch,
Right.
and we were talking about video games. So
Mm-hmm.
I popped up and I saw an article today on the national interest. I'm sure this is getting covered across gaming journalism, but
Since when
Nintendo
does the national
reports.
interest cover gaming?
Well, that's why I read it. Nintendo reports massive 428% surge in profits thanks to coronavirus.
I believe it wholeheartedly. What is it? It's because of Animal Crossing, right?
It's because of Animal Crossing. This game sold, I think, over 20 million copies, and it's
Jesus.
only been out a few months. When did it come out? In April?
Yeah, it was in the height of the coronavirus, pandemic. I remember it was like a godsend because while everybody's stuck indoors, you get to pretend to be outdoors and like collect shit and build your little island. I love that game. It's pretty fun. Have you played it yet?
I've never played an Animal Crossing game.
Neither have I. This was the first one I ever played, but I don't know. I felt like it was really repetitive. I got bored of it after a little while, but it was definitely worth playing for sure.
Are there finishing kills?
No, there are no. There's no killing whatsoever.
There's no killing
No,
whatsoever.
no. The point of the game is that you arrive on an abandoned island and you have to like fucking like pick apples and like gather sticks and find build shovels and make your town. That's what you do. You like do favors for people, like pulling up weeds and shit, and then that's how you build your town.
It's funny because my girlfriend, who never plays video games, I don't think she's played a video game in 15 years. I don't
Mm.
know the last time she's played one, not since I've known her. And she was like, "I think this game may relax me during the pandemic." They really lucked out, Nintendo. And this goes back to my original theory that the culprits of COVID-19 were the Imperial Japanese out of their old bioweapon facilities in Manchukuo.
So that they can sell
Unit
Nintendo.
731. So they brought it back. They released COVID-19 to trap everyone indoors so they can start selling video games.
I think
The
we
whole
have.
water.
I think we have to make like an explicit statement that was a satirical line of
There's
argumentation.
zero satire. That is a legitimate theory that I think should get some more merit.
We're gonna get
Um,
deplatformed, Henry. Careful.
the platform for fake news. No, I don't really think that happens, but it's funny to think about. Now, speaking of conspiracies, well, I guess we should pull this back and tackle this with, I guess, some degree of sensitivity because this was very tragic of what
Hmm.
happened. And this is what we're going to be talking about today, the unfortunate explosion that happened in Lebanon and Beirut on Tuesday. 2,750 tons of ammonium nitrate being stored in a warehouse in a port in Beirut exploded, and over 100 people were killed. I think the death count is closer to around 135 last time I actually checked it.
Hmm.
Um, Between 4 to 5,000 people were injured so far. Beirut's port was pretty much obliterated, and the buildings in the surrounding area were severely damaged. And I think now about 250,000 people are homeless. And Lebanon's national reserve has been destroyed as well. The grain reserve was being stored in some nearby grain silos, and it was pretty intense to look at. It was one of the most violent pieces of footage I've seen in a very long time.
Insane. Yeah. Hmm.
It was I don't mean to say the word awesome, but like it was awesome in power, not
Yeah.
awesome as in cool, as
Hmm.
in it was a
It's very sheer
magnificent,
destructive
a
force.
sheer
Yeah. Hmm.
destructive mushroom cloud, which led to a lot of people speculating that the explosion was caused by nukes,
Tactical nukes.
tactical nukes.
No, no, it wasn't.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't caused by tactical nukes.
No, it definitely wasn't. No.
Well, Danny, did you see that mushroom cloud?
Yeah, I know. I saw it, and it was actually a like stunningly perfect example of a mushroom cloud. You know, like it looked perfect. But that's more of results of like atmospheric conditions and the sheer like magnitude of the blast than an indication of a nuclear device. So there's this dude, a physicist named David Dearborn, at the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory. He had told Scientific American in 1989 a lot about this misconception that mushroom clouds are linked directly to a nuclear or thermonuclear explosion. So he writes, a massive detonation of chemical explosions would produce the same effect, i.e., a mushroom cloud. And he goes on to say that a mushroom cloud forms when an explosion creates a very hot bubble of gas. In the case of a nuclear detonation, the bomb emits a blast of X-rays, which ionize and heat the surrounding air. That hot bubble of gas is known as a fireball. The hot air is buoyant, so it quickly rises and expands. That rising cloud creates a powerful updraft, which picks up dust, forming the stem of the mushroom cloud. But any large explosion in the right atmospheric conditions can cause a mushroom cloud as well. And they're not completely they're not mutually exclusive. So you can have a mushroom cloud with a large explosion, and any large explosion.
Well, let's pull this back a little bit because it's I don't blame people for being confused about this, and
Nope.
I do blame people for thinking that it was a nuclear bomb, just because if it was a nuke or an atom bomb, then the blast radius would have been so much larger than
Right.
what it was.
Right.
But I
And we
don't.
would have known. We would have known by now, right?
Yeah, we
Let's
would have
be
known by the
straight.
radiation
Yeah, there's no
damage and all
report.
that.
Yeah, there's no reports of any amounts of radiation.
And of course, by coincidence, there is the anniversary of Hiroshima.
Yep,
So
that was 85 years ago, right?
yeah,
Yeah, I
so
mean,
people are jumping to conclusions. I
mhm.
mean, hell, you even reminded me that not on this podcast, but we were talking privately about um, how I said to you I thought that shit was going to happen in Lebanon
Mhm.
around this time,
Right,
and I said that the U.S. and Israel may try to take out Nasrallah,
right,
who is the leader of Hezbollah,
right, hmm
because Bibi's taking a lot of heat in the election right now. So I could
hmm
see them making a move on them, but I thought that something was going to go down in Lebanon.
right.
And it would have been a pretty good opportunity for me to jump on this bandwagon conspiracy. Like, told you so.
Well, I mean, Nasrallah lives in Beirut. Like he's based out of Beirut, so you know that it's a tempting
It was tempting, but
theory.
it was very easy to go down to crazy sauce on this one
Hell yeah.
because
Hmm.
it's just filled with crazy sauce about some of the conspiracies that people are throwing out on here, and
Right.
I think you got to nip them in the butt right away. But let me just kind of it has been confusing because there's been a lot over the first couple of days. Now the story seems to be pretty confirmed of what happened, but
Hmm.
um, here's what I got, or at least how I perceive things, and let me know if I got anything wrong. So this nitrate, this ammonium nitrate, has been stored in Lebanon since 2013. So essentially, that means that the Lebanese officials they knew for more than 6 years that the nitrate was being stored in Beirut, and this came from that. This was cargo that arrived in Lebanon back in 2013, and it was on board a Russian-owned a cargo vessel heading from Georgia to Mozambique, and
Mozambique. Yeah.
and it was forced to dock in Beirut after facing technical problems at sea. So Lebanese officials they prevented the vessel from sailing, and then the ship was eventually abandoned by its owners. And the cargo was then offloaded and placed into a hangar in the Beirut port, and that was
That
the
was the story. They left it there.
that was a story. But I mean, I think the big story is how kind of incompetent the government was over in Lebanon, because apparently Lebanese customs, they were sending warnings over to the government saying like, hey, we need to get this dangerous cargo out of here. And there must have been at least 5, 6 letters, correspondence reaching out to them, illustrating the severity of storing ammonium nitrate in a hangar. And they all went ignored. They didn't make it. They didn't get pushed through the bureaucracy.
Yep, and you're talking about Badri Dar. Sorry if I'm butchering his name. He's Lebanon's director of customs, but evidently, he had lobbied, legal people like legislators and shit like that to get rid of this, calling it a floating bomb, and he did this, I believe, total of 6 times in the course of the time between when the vessel had docked, the MV Rosas, which is the ship that docked in Beirut. From when it docked until the time of the explosion, it took him about 6 different letters that he sent to legal experts to try and get rid of this. He even tried to sell it to the Lebanese army, right? Because ammonium nitrate can be used for weapons, right? You can use it for bombs, and they didn't bite. So it's just egregious, and I mean that kind of like brings me to just generally speaking ammonium nitrate and like how shittily people treat this very volatile chemical, and how they store it. I did a lot of research on it, went down
Well,
a
put up.
fucking rabbit hole,
So let me.
for it.
So what it basically is, though, is it's just is an odorless, crystalline substance
Right,
that's used in fertilizer,
right,
right?
right, exactly. And in its natural state, by itself, it's inert, right? So it's like very stable, right? But when certain elements are, introduced to it, i.e., heat and other debris, it can cause a chemical reaction which can cause an explosion, right? And it can explode very fucking violently, as we've seen with this situation in Beirut. But before we're going to jump into that, though, I did want to kind of crush some of these ridiculous ideas, because it 100% was ammonium nitrate. And like I think if you take to Twitter or you take to some of the social media platforms, they point to a lot of things, to try to distract you intentionally, or just stupid people trying to make stupid claims
Wait, was Carol
on the
Baskins
internet.
in Beirut?
Yeah. Yes, she was in Beirut at the time.
Okay, I think this mystery is solved.
Right. It was 100% the Tiger King. And yeah.
Carol
No.
Baskin and the environmentalists, they put ammonium nitrate in the hangar.
No, I mean, like, but honestly, like, some of the shit that that I was seeing was just so ridiculous. It definitely wasn't a nuke, like we were talking about before. That's not even a question. Obviously, the blast radius would just have been massive. We would have known, like I was saying before, the elevated radiation from a nuclear device would have shown up like pretty much immediately. Also, there's some interesting parts about just like looking at it. I don't know how many of the videos you've seen or how many angles you've seen of this one, of this blast there, but a nuclear weapon would have a blinding white flash and a thermal pulse or like a surge of heat. And this one was really like bright brown red, you know, like this bright brown red color. And, just the differences in colors give you an indication for the heat, like how hot the blast was. So that's another way that people were trying to say that it was like nuclear, because of that it wouldn't be nuclear, because if you just look at the color, it tells you an indication of the heat. Nuclear weapons burn very, very hot, so hot that like people in the near vicinity would have burned. Like there would have been fires in like massive fires everywhere in that immediate area, which there weren't. There were some fires, but not nearly as many
Well,
as
yeah, that was the
not
first.
not
That was the
nearly as
first
many.
major sign. All those play. all those buildings would have incinerated.
Right. They would have
It
just
wouldn't
been
have
burnt
been
to a
just
crisp.
yeah, it wouldn't have been, windows have been broken. I mean, obviously these buildings and this infrastructure was very badly damaged.
Right.
But if it was a nuclear bomb or an atom bomb, this shit it would have been there wouldn't have been a building
Nope.
anymore. It would
No.
have just been rubble.
There's just nothing. And in the immediate area, you can see like part of the harbor fell into the ocean, right? So it was strong enough to like really wreak some fucking havoc, but not on the scale of a nuclear device. And then I was seeing a lot of shit. Like this one dude on Twitter was like, "Oh, it was a small tactical nuke, like
Oh God,
the
I hate it when
Davy."
people
You ever heard of the Davy Crockett
tactical
nuke?
nuke,
A tactical nuke, you know.
tactical nuke.
The Davy Crockett. Have you heard like a Davy Crockett nuclear device? It's like
No,
it's
I
a
think I
very
have,
very
but
small.
I don't know. Just no, I haven't.
Yeah,
What is it?
dude. It's super small, right? It's like they put it on like a what amounts to like a large mortar system, right? It could be carried by two people, right? I guess you can consider this as a suitcase nuclear weapon, right? Or a suitcase nuke, because it's around that size, but can be fired. There's this one cool video of Robert Kennedy watching one of these things going off. I can send it to you later. It's pretty neat. But again, same idea, right? So we're not seeing a bright flash or any radiation because you'd still see that. And also, these small nukes are not, they're not strong enough either, right? So a Davy Crockett nuke yields about 20 tons of like what the equivalent of 20 tons of TNT versus an estimated 240 tons of TNT for this Beirut blast. So, small tactical nukes like that just they don't meet the spec. They don't have the destructive power that this thing had, and also no radiation. So that's not there. And then I was saying a lot of shit about like how perfect that circular, like you remember on the video, there was like the initial like burning fire, right? Because there was a fire beforehand, one explosion which caused a fire, and then you see the smokestack, and then immediately there's that blast, and then out of that blast comes this like perfect spherical cloud. Do you remember seeing that?
Yeah,
Right, and they're
there
like,
was two blasts. There was one, and then it almost kind of looked like the second blast almost looked like a
it looked like the fucking blast in the Bikini Atoll when they were doing the nuclear tests. Do you remember? Have you seen that footage in the past?
I was gonna say the um, dream that Sarah Connor has in Terminator
Yes,
2.
100%. Yeah, yeah. If you haven't seen the Bikini Atoll one, it looks just like that.
Good for you for getting that reference. I
Mm-hmm.
was scared it was gonna go over people's head.
No, no, Terminator's one of those that I've definitely watched many times at this point.
What was the movie? What was the movie that Ronald? It wasn't Terminator 2. He wasn't president yet, but Ronald Reagan. Apparently, he was moved by a documentary about like what a nuclear holocaust look like.
Oh, what was that movie?
It was a documentary about this is the world after nuclear fallout, and they showed a bomb, and Ronald Reagan was like, "I must end this war, this Cold War."
Ronald Reagan would be moved by a movie because he was in the pictures.
I was in the pictures. This is my wife Nancy. We were in the pictures.
No, but I mean, like, okay, so you see that blast cloud, right? And it was like in this video. I mean, camera technology is getting so much better, and there were so many good angles that came out of this. People were basically being able to film in 4K from several different angles. So like how beautiful, like it was so destructive, and a lot of people died, but it was a beautiful explosion in the sense that it perfectly created this mushroom cloud, and everybody's saying, hey, that perfect circular cloud, that has to be a nuclear weapon, or at least a weapon, right? Like no natural explosion is going to do that. And that's a big nope too. That's called Wilson clouds. They're also known as transient condensation clouds, and they're observable for any large explosions, specifically in humid air. And if you're in the port of Beirut, we can imagine that it's humid there. So when a nuclear weapon or a large amount of conventional explosive is detonated in sufficiently humid air, there's a thing called a negative phase of the shock wave, which causes what I can't even explain this one, but it's called a rarefaction in the surrounding air during the explosion, but not contained within it, right? So that's why you see this initial explosion, and then almost immediately afterwards, you see this ball of like condensed water vapor form around that explosion, right? If you remember back to that video, that's how it looks. But and then once that pressure, and that condensation returns to normal, the Wilson cloud dissipates, right? So we saw that like perfectly formed water vapor bubble around the explosion that moved out quite a bit because of how explosive the blast was, but kind of immediately went away. And this is just normal, right? This is normal physics. This is going to happen for any large explosion in a humid atmospheric area. And the last one that I came up with, like pretty much immediately when I saw this, I was like, that looks like Moab, mother of all bombs. That's the one that that's the rabbit hole I almost went down.
Yeah, but even that blast radius would be way too wide.
Actually, I was incorrect about that. The yield of this one was of the Beirut blast was 10 times more powerful, believe it or not.
Really?
Yep. TNT wise, it was 10 times more powerful. Now, I would say that the Moab would be much more destructive because it's designed to destroy infrastructure and kill people, right? And it bursts in midair, which maximizes that yield, right? And so in this case, it's closer to a correct assumption because it has a high yield and it doesn't have any radiation, but it's still too small. Right, that Beirut blast was estimated to be 10 times more powerful. Now, it could have been FOAB, or father of all bombs, which the Russians have. Apparently, the Russians stole our idea, and they made a thermobaric bomb that is apparently stronger than the mother of all bombs by 2x or something like that. But I don't know if I believe that or not. Anyway, but the fact that it's thermobaric, though, this bomb makes it makes sense to me because a thermobaric weapon, also known as an aerosol bomb, also known as a vacuum bomb, it's like a type of explosive that uses the oxygen from the surrounding air to generate like a massive high temperature explosion. So what happens from that is that a blast wave will produce a much longer explosion or a longer duration than any conventional like condensed explosive. So basically, it's like mixing with the surrounding air to cause a bigger shock wave, right? And actually, thermobaric explosions aren't necessarily limited to just bombs, right? Like bombs that people make. This can happen accidentally. As an example, thermobaric explosives, like they can happen in unconfined vapor cloud explosions. So sometimes this can happen, from flammable dust or droplets mixing with an existing explosion. So this could happen in situations like a flour mill, for example. Like in the olden days, if you had an explosion in a flour mill, it would create a thermobaric explosion because all of the flour in the air that got thrown up because of the initial explosion would ignite at the same time. And that ignition would basically eat up the oxygen, cause this negative pressure wave, and make more of a blast wave, more of a concussion. Same thing happens with coal mines, right? Coal mine explosions have this like strong concussive potential. And many of the explosions of ammonium nitrate in fertilizer factories, this was the same exact principle. A bunch of external chemicals and things like that were flammable were added to the mix to create this thermobaric explosion. So that's why Moab was probably the closest idea for like something nefarious, but it still just doesn't cut it because it's Moab or FOAB are the two like alleged most powerful conventional bombs, but even their blast yields were too small to have caused this explosion. So the only other weapons with bigger yields are nuclear, and we already covered that. Like we already went over the fact that they're not nuclear.
And thermobaric weapons, they're used for things like foxholes and tunnels and
bunker busters
in caves and shit like that, like to get like fortified infrastructure.
Right. And that's why like this was in practice a thermobaric explosion, right? Because we saw this giant concussion, this big shockwave that basically leveled the surrounding area and then also shattered windows for like miles out, I think it registered as a 3.3 on the Richter scale. That's how strong this explosion was. It got picked up by the, like the seismographs and shit, which is nuts. How incredibly powerful that blast was.
No, it's insane. It was one of the most incredible pieces of footage I've seen in a long time. It is just ridiculous, though, how incompetent the Lebanese government is in all facets when it
Nuts,
comes to
nuts.
storing things,
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to just like basic public safety to their banking system. Jesus, it's one of the most corrupt places on the face of the earth right now,
Excuse
and
me
it's slowly.
for not knowing, but Beirut has a president or a prime minister. I forget.
So
I
Lebanon,
mean,
they have
Lebanon
both.
has a
They
president or
have
a prime.
both.
Who
So
is the
the
guy?
way
Who is the guy that was out recently saying that the people who are responsible for this should pay or something like that, or like
that was their prime minister.
that was
So
the
the way
prime
that
minister.
things
Thank you.
this thing the way that it's set up in Lebanon is because so it's very very like all countries in the Middle East. It's divided across sectarian lines, but it's a
Mm-hmm.
little different. As in, there's a large Christian population in Lebanon.
Mm-hmm.
So after the Lebanese Civil War, they set it up where the president will always be Christian, the prime minister will always be a Muslim, and the speaker of parliament will be Shiite Muslim. So they represent all three sectarian areas. But the most powerful person in in Lebanon is typically the
The prime minister.
is Hassan Diab, who is the prime minister.
So that's the dude who's
Hariri,
saying,
Hariri, who
"Good."
he was forced to resign back in January,
Mm-hmm.
but um, yeah, they have kind of like a system where they have to have uh, two sectarian leaders as their president and prime minister.
That's an interesting way to include religion in your state. Imagine if
Well,
the president had to be like a Christian, and the Speaker of the House had to be like a like a Catholic person, and you know, here in the United States, that'd be nuts.
well, that's the way it is in the Middle East. It's the reason why it's like that is because people issue jobs by their religious sects, and it goes a lot deeper than just like their religion. Like it's not that they're all just crazy theological nut jobs.
Right.
It's more of political terms. Like their political identities, these religions. So if you're from a Christian community, or if you're from a Sunni community or a Shia community or a Druze community, you are most likely going to favor people in your community, and they're the ones who are going to be getting the government jobs. Because a lot of these countries, they're just giant governments. They don't really have the same type of private industry that a Western country would have. Their people are fighting for the high paying government jobs, so that's why they have to split it out. Because I mean, there was a 15-year civil war in the 70s and the 80s that that was largely drawn across sectarian lines. So that's how they keep the peace. But now it's Lebanon is such a corrupt place right now. It's essentially a failed state. This explosion happened at a time where it couldn't have been worse
Mm.
with
Mm-hmm.
with COVID-19 going on, and even more so the fact that there is a massive economic crisis going on in Lebanon right now.
Yep.
They are one of the excuse me. Lebanon has recently entered the world of the world hyperinflation table.
The world hyperinflation table.
Yeah, they're
Jeez.
on a table. Yeah, so they are experiencing hyperinflation. They are the 62nd case of hyperinflation in the world history, or in modern history, and the very first one in the Middle East. So there's never been a Middle Eastern country or a North African country that has experienced hyperinflation. There's been African countries that have, but not a Middle Eastern or Northern African country. So that puts them right up there with Venezuela. So
Mm-hmm.
they're the two countries on this planet right now that are going through hyperinflation.
Like
And
the Weimar Republic Germany before
yeah,
Nazi Germany.
exactly.
Yeah.
Like the classic cases, the most well known cases are Germany in the 30s,
Mm-hmm.
and then Zimbabwe
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
in the late 2000s.
Wasn't it like in Zimbabwe like $1 trillion, like a trillion of their dollars for like a loaf of bread or something stupid and ridiculous? It was just some
People
ridiculous
were
number that you can't even like fathom how big that number is.
in Zimbabwe. People were using the currency um, was used as toilet paper because it was less
Or like
valuable than toilet paper.
kindling, you know?
Yeah, it was just worthless paper. So they're right up there with Venezuela, and that's not good company to be next to. And just they're at a some stats are that they're at a 462 annual inflation rate. Food prices have raised by 200%, and the Lebanese pound lost 82% of its value last or this year. So the value of the pound, I forget the exact percentage. It's been going down for a while. It went down a lot last year. If you could remember, we did some shows about this where at the very least we touched upon this, how the government issued a tax on the WhatsApp app.
The WhatsApp, yeah.
WhatsApp app, yeah, whatever.
WhatsApp.
WhatsApp. I can't I can't say WhatsApp. I have to say WhatsApp app. I just
The
a
WhatsApp.
brain
The WhatsApp app.
I'm like an old man who
Oh, the
gets holidays
Facebook.
though. Where is the face story?
My book.
The my book. It's like when your mom calls your PlayStation Nintendo.
Yeah.
No, mom, it's a PlayStation.
You know, Nintendo actually they worked against that. Like they didn't want people calling their thing, all gaming consoles Nintendos, because then they wouldn't be able to trademark Nintendo. So they actually worked against like having people use that as the word for a gaming system, a Nintendo.
Really?
Yeah, this is time number 2 we talk about Nintendo on the show. Interesting.
I'll throw another interesting Nintendo fact that Donkey Kong was meant to be Popeye. The game was supposed to be Popeye, and Pluto was the guy throwing the barrels,
Mm.
and it'd be Popeye jumping over all the barrels and saving olive oil.
And what happened?
They couldn't get the rights,
So they just
so they
switched Popeye to a gorilla?
so they switched. I guess maybe the way that I'm not sure how they transitioned to a gorilla, but somehow they did. And I think
They changed the sprite.
they changed the sprite a little bit, and they made Pluto into a giant ape, and they made Popeye into Mario,
Hmm.
which is now, Super Mario. So that's interesting.
That's so interesting.
All right, so back to the financial crisis in Lebanon.
Great transition.
Back to the financial crisis.
I mean, no, this backdrop though, like the fact that they're experiencing one of the worst financial crises, in modern history for the whole region, right? Let alone their own country. You can also bring it even further back to like the civil war that they had wasn't that long ago. It was within a lifetime. And they're kind of used to like the whole region being somewhat unstable. You know, and they're used to explosions. But like this kind
Well,
of
Lebanon has been relatively safe for the past 30 years compared to other countries. It built up a reputation of being it's a tourist attraction
Mhm.
for not only people in the Gulf but for people from Europe and people in America. Like
Right.
there's a lot of dollars that are brought into Lebanon. Its nickname is the Paris of the Middle East. There's a lot of education. There's a fantastic university system there. University of Beirut's there, which is one of the best schools in the world. There's a lot of Western professors that go there to teach there. the city itself has a lot going for it. They largely do have an
Population.
educated labor force,
Mm-hmm.
so it's not a shithole.
No, definitely not. What I'm saying
Though
is that
it's
they
turning into
that
one.
they have they have that in their history. So it's like, opening up old wounds to see this blast go off in their in their capital city.
Well, yeah, it's definitely going to lead to even more resentment to the current government that's in place because,
And rightfully so. Like what we were pointing out, dude. The fact that, like I was saying, trying to figure this out before, but the prime minister goes on TV and says like, you know, the martyrs and all this other stuff won't be lost in vain. Like we're gonna find out who did this, and we're gonna hold them accountable. But the people who should be held accountable is like the government. It's like they're accountable for this because of the fact that they've been storing this ammonium nitrate, which is highly volatile, highly explosive, you know, and they've been just chilling on it. And it's not like they didn't know about it. Like I was telling you, their director of customs, Badri Dar, had been repeatedly warning them about this, right? And it's not like this isn't new territory. It's not like ammonium nitrate never blew up before. I did a bunch of research on this, and this kind of happens a lot with ammonium nitrate. It makes me surprised that governments and regulatory like bureaucracies don't do more to protect against ammonium nitrate. I can take this back as far as Oppau, Germany, 1921, 450,000, 4,500 tons of ammonium sulfate and ammonium nitrate mixed exploded. That killed 500 to 600 people and injured 2,000 more. There was two explosions, and they were a half a second apart, and it formed a 90-meter wide crater, which is phenomenally big, right? Then later on in Texas City in 1947, this one's probably closest to Beirut's explosion in terms of scale. This one was 2,300 tons of ammonium nitrate, and the resulting fire caused more damage to the surrounding area than in Beirut, but it was like 1,000 buildings and almost 400 people were killed. And this was according to the Historical Association in Texas. Kind of very recently, I don't know if you remember this one, but back in 2013 in Waco, Texas, there was a fertilizer plant, the West Texas fertilizer plant. That thing exploded. Also, ammonium nitrate explosion. This basically happened when a fertilizer plant caught fire. There's some discussion about whether or not it was done intentionally, but the point though is that there was a fire. There was a large cache of ammonium nitrate, and that exploded. That killed 160 people, including all 15 firefighters that were there to try and put out the initial fire. And something like 150 buildings were damaged or destroyed, caused a 93-foot wide crater, just massive explosion. And then the most recent one that I found was in Tianjin, China, which was a series of explosions that killed 173, also to do with the storing of ammonium nitrate, and it was 800 tons of it. And basically it caused fires that lasted an entire weekend, and they reported 173 fatalities, and of those 104 were firefighters, so first responders. So we have this long fucking laundry list of situations where poorly storing ammonium nitrate causes like this giant explosion, massive loss of life, and massive destruction of public and private property. And people should be mad at their government for just sitting on what amounts to, as the director of customs calls, a floating bomb.
What was the cause? How did it ignite again? Because I've heard different stuff. The main thing I've seen is that it was fireworks that ignited it. Am
this
I
this point on this point it's still up for debate, but if I did a lot of research on the West Waco, Texas fertilizer plant, and this one reminded me the most of this explosion, both in the character of the explosion and in the size. And what it appears is that there was definitely a fire, right? Something exploded, something burned in the vicinity. Whether it was in the same facility or whether it was in an adjacent facility is unclear, right? You can even see in one of the videos, you can see like the smokestack and like a bunch of fireworks going off, right? So that the idea that it was in a fireworks factory, there's legs to that. You can actually see that in the video evidence. How that fire started is unknown. But remember back when I was talking about thermobaric explosions, right? So ammonium nitrate in and of itself, by itself, is relatively stable. But once you start mixing a bunch of other elements in it, namely heat and other combustible materials like fireworks, right? You can destabilize ammonium nitrate and cause a massive explosion, which is what I believe happened. What caused that initial fire is still unclear. We don't know.
So I have another fun Nintendo fact for you.
Okay.
So Nintendo started out as a playing card company.
Yes, it did.
Yeah.
Yes, it did. No wonder.
No, but it's
no
really
wonder Pokemon took off.
Yeah, I was just unclear because I've heard a lot of different things about fireworks, and then of course people on the interwebs are like, that could be caused by fireworks. Tactical nuke.
Well, so okay, the explosion wasn't the fireworks, right? So
no, of course it wasn't the fireworks.
Like I read some people saying like that if you take all the fireworks and blow them up all at the same time, it's like, no, dude, no, like absolutely not. But some of the video footage will show like this smokestack up, right? And it's like this dark brown or like yeah, exactly.
Well, that wasn't fireworks.
It's so wild. I mean, you did see some fireworks going off in that initial blaze. Like I saw it. It is pretty clear that there were fireworks in there, but that's not what caused that massive explosion. That was definitely ammonium nitrate, 100%.
So I think the issue with a lot of these governments is that a lot of people are hired through nepotism.
Yeah, for sure.
So they're just really, really bloated bureaucracies where people do nothing.
And they just have no what's the word I'm looking for? No incentive, right? To give a shit.
Yeah,
like to try.
I was talking to somebody who spent a lot of time in the Middle East for many years, and you had some job in economics in Egypt, and he was saying that he was walking around a government office, and every single man there was just reading the newspaper, wasn't working, just reading the newspaper.
Mm-hmm.
No one did anything.
That was his job.
That was just his job. They sat back, just read the newspaper all day, didn't do any work. But a lot of bloated bureaucracies are like that, especially when that's how you hand out political favors, by giving them a high-paying government job. But this economic crisis is, I think we're at the point where you could definitely call Lebanon a failed state with how severe this is going. This isn't just like an economic crisis. This is a massive meltdown that Lebanon hasn't experienced at the very least since their civil war. And what's interesting about this is that so the pound lost 82% of its value. I think I said that before.
That, right? Mm-hmm. Like, how did that happen? Like, how did it come about?
So the Lebanese central bank was running a Ponzi scheme.
Okay, go on.
So their currency, the Lebanese pound, it's pegged to the dollar.
Okay, so
now if you're going,
okay, I get it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they pegged their currency so for stability reasons.
Right, makes sense.
So now if you're going to peg your currency to the dollar, you need to have access to dollars
to back it up. Right.
If your currency weakens if you want to maintain the exchange rate, you have to buy up your own currency. Mm-hmm. But in order to buy up your own currency, you need another currency to buy it with. So when you buy up the Lebanese pound, you would have to sell dollars. So if the Lebanese pounds started to weaken, they would have to buy up pounds in order to reduce the supply to strengthen their own currency. So
Okay.
they have dollars on reserve if their own currency starts to weaken, they can buy up their currency, limiting the supply, thus increasing the demand
Right.
for the Lebanese
Strengthening
pound.
their currency. Right.
So
That's how they
they
do it.
that's how they were doing it.
But they do it with dollars, though.
Yeah,
Right.
they do it with dollars, and a lot of currency, a lot of countries they peg their currency to the dollar.
Right. So nothing new.
So they would sell dollars in exchange. The problem was is that Lebanon didn't have enough dollars in reserve.
To keep up with it, or just in general, were they just lying about how many dollars they had in reserve?
So they well, I'll get to that. So
Okay.
it's ridiculous what was going on in this bank. So the Lebanese economy, the reason why it was set up like this, or at least one of the reasons why it was set up this way, is because they bring in a lot of dollars through tourism. So people are they have beaches and stuff and mountains, and it's a nice city. So there's a lot of people who are bringing dollars. But what screwed everything up is that, and this is what most poor states, this is the problem that most developing countries face, is that they don't produce anything.
Hmm.
So most of their goods come from imports, and all these international transactions are settled in dollars, which end up draining their reserves. So since they import about 80% of their domestic products that are coming in. They don't have like a lot
All
of
right. Food, raw
manufacturing
materials, things like
plants,
that.
and
Right.
they don't have an agriculture sector.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have any of that. And it's also a small country. There's like 6 million people, so they don't
Right.
have these big industries. They're importing basically everything that they consume. They're not building anything. They don't produce anything, and that's a recipe for disaster. Like
Right.
if you're not if you're not producing things, um,
Then you're dependent on the rest of the world for
you're dependent on the rest of the world.
that's that.
Like countries that just sell raw goods are still struggling. Like Russia is a country that just sells raw goods, and Russia's economy is a mess too. But
Right,
it's not
because
as
they get
bad as like
smacked.
Lebanon.
Because they get smacked because they send out all their raw goods at pennies on the dollar, and then somebody else who manufactures takes those raw goods, makes a product, and sells it back to them at a premium. So they're kind of losing money and they're losing material. So it's not always a great. Just because you produce raw material doesn't make you rich in and of yourself. You have to have a good balance of both the production of raw material and manufacturing of your own goods that can compete in a global market for the same products. But yeah,
Exactly. That's exactly it. And if you look at a country like Japan or South Korea, Japan especially, Japan doesn't have any natural resources.
right. So it
It's all
imports a lot of that
mountains.
stuff, right?
They don't
Right.
even have enough. They don't have enough space to have like cattle ranges.
Mm-hmm.
That's why meat's so expensive there, because it's
And
just all
wagyu
mountains and
beef,
forests.
like they just like. You ever hear that they like massage the wagyu beef and like they make them like super happy cows and like up until the moment that they kill them, they're apparently like in a constant spa, and that's why the beef tastes so good, or so I'm told.
I thought the more miserable you made
The
the
animal.
the animal, the better it tasted. That's why veal's so good.
Well, that's one argument, but that also goes against the arguments for halal and kosher meats. So
And I'm not for animal cruelty, by the way.
neither am I.
So but what ended up happening in Lebanon's
Right.
case, all the money that they got from the tourism industry, which I mean, the tourism industry is not going to prop up your economy.
Nope.
Like it's a nice to have, but there's only so many people that can come visit your
I mean, tourism
hotels,
is
and
great to have. Like you can make a ton
it's
of money
great.
off of it,
It's
but it's
great
not
to have.
scalable. And
It's
it's
not a
not reliable.
scalable way to build a developed economy
Right.
that can compete with other countries.
One little pandemic is all you need to just absolutely ruin, your economy if it's mostly based in tourism.
You need to
I mean,
diversify your
that's
funds.
what happened in Japan. If we're talking about Japan again, right? COVID
Japan's
19.
getting hit hard.
Japan was in a recession, right? And they were in a major recession. And part of the plan to get out of the recession back in October was like Shinzo Abe was saying, like, oh, we're gonna ramp up tourism. We're gonna ramp up tourism. That's how we're gonna get out of this recession, because they make a lot of money in tourism, like a lot. And then COVID-19 happened, which basically like shut down 90% of their economy. So
Japan
yeah, yeah.
they
Think
didn't
about. I
shut
mean, we
down
couldn't.
90% of the economy. They shut down like a portion of their
Well, I mean,
economy.
look at it this way.
They're in recession, no doubt,
Like
but
they couldn't. They
they
could.
have other
We were
industries.
just.
They
We
sell
were.
cars and
Yeah. We were just saying that they don't have any raw materials, right?
yeah.
So all of their production, motor vehicles, electronics, so
Oh
on
yeah,
and
I
so
thought you were
forth.
saying the tourism industry, but yeah,
No,
that
no,
makes
no.
sense. Yeah,
Yeah, I'm talking about everything.
yeah,
Like the COVID-19 shut down everything, and since they can't have tourism and they can't have imports because of this basically the same reason, right? COVID-19, it makes like a recipe for disaster, right? Like 90% of their economic activity is like out of the window at this point, because they can no longer import raw materials to create things. They can no longer export their fully crafted things. It got so bad that my little sister had to wait 2 full months to buy a Nintendo Switch. That's like what, time number 5 that we mentioned Nintendo. But like, because their suppliers couldn't, they couldn't get silicon from Malaysia or Taiwan or wherever they were getting their silicon, you know, and they just couldn't make enough Nintendo Switches to keep up with the demand. Everybody wanted to play Animal Crossing, but they couldn't. I think it's still bad. Like, people are price gouging Nintendo Switches. Anyway, that's not the point. The point is, like, a tourism based economy, an economy where you're not manufacturing your own stuff and you're not having a good diversified mix of both raw material and manufacturing and tourism will spell disaster. And I think what sucks about Lebanon right now is that they were already, as you point out, going through a Ponzi scheme, right?
well,
They're
yeah. In this
weakening
case,
currency.
the fact that they had a pretty one-dimensional economy is not even half of what's going
Right.
on there. So all the money that was coming in from tourism, it was going right into the purchase of goods. And in response to this, the Lebanese government, they started offering really attractive interest rates to incentivize people to deposit large amounts of dollars into Lebanese banks.
Okay. Well, what are we
So they were
talking?
offering 14% interest rates just
Whoa.
just to keep their cash in banks.
14%?
Yeah.
Jeez, I wish I would have known about that. That's a huge
No,
return.
you should be happy that you didn't know about it.
Well, you get in and you get out real quick.
Yeah, get in. It would have been a disaster because they shut down the banks. You can't
Their
get
banks were
you
like the
can't get
Hotel California, right?
their
You can
banks are
check in
shut their
anytime
banks
you
are
want.
shut down.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
can't get
totally.
your dollars from the Lebanese bank. And this
What
was totally
dollars?
unsustainable
Yeah,
because a 14% interest rate in a bank.
that's nuts. That's nuts. How are they generating that interest?
So the way that they were generating that they couldn't generate the interest.
Yeah,
That's
it's
why they're in a
impossible.
crisis.
Yeah.
But what they came up with was that they ended up paying the interest rate by using the deposits of other people investing in Lebanese banks.
Okay. So there's
So
there's your
they were
Ponzi
just
scheme.
using they were paying off initial investors with future deposits.
Robbing Peter to pay Paul. It's called, I
Yeah,
think.
it was a definition of a Ponzi scheme. They were just giving they were promising 14% interest rates, and there's no way that they were going to be able to provide 14% interest rates. It's just unsustainable,
Hmm.
completely nuts and crazy to
Nuts.
think that those banks would be able to do that. So they were just taking the deposits from other people, and that's how they were giving the interest rates out.
That's
And
nuts.
it's not just the people who live in Lebanon. Lebanon has a really big diaspora because of the Lebanese Civil War.
Hmm.
So
People from all over the world.
they get
Yep.
billions of dollars in investments from just their diaspora alone. I mean, there's a big Lebanese population in the U.S. and Canada and France, they're they're pretty big. Um, all these people lost so much money,
Hmm.
and the banks are closed down, so you can't make a withdrawal. You can't go to a Lebanese bank right now and withdraw your money. Say, hey, can I have dollars, please? No, sorry,
Should have went to the
banks
gold
not
standard.
business. So when they peg their currency, they pegged it. Um, it's 1,500 pounds to the dollar,
Uh-huh.
but you can't make exchanges right now, so you have to go to the black market. So now you have to sell. You have to sell your pounds in a black market, and we're talking about like 5,000, 10,000 pounds to get a dollar, to get access to a dollar.
Right. So you're losing a substantial value there. Mm-hmm. Huge loss.
You're paying between three to the in some cases 7, 8, 9 times what the original value was to get
Mm-hmm.
access to a dollar just so you can buy something. So their currency is ruined. Like their economy's
They
broken.
should
They're
totally
gonna have
switch to
to.
just crypto
They're
or something like that.
they're gonna have to just
They're gonna have to do
get rid
something.
of their currency. Like
Yeah.
they're gonna have to start using dollar. They're gonna have to do what Zimbabwe did. Zimbabwe, they had to switch to the dollar,
Just
and
U.S.
just use the
dollars.
dollar currency.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only thing that they can do.
Yeah, but
But
the thing about even U.S. dollars is that like unless you feel like storing thousands of dollars under your mattress, you need a bank that can store it and so that you can keep it safe and also like use it online and like do electronic transactions and shit like that. I think more likely, Zimbabwe going to the dollar is one thing, but I think more likely Lebanon in this day and age would probably just switch to crypto, or at least that's what I would recommend to them. They have the internet in Lebanon, like they can do this. And
they're
also, Bitcoin is on the up right now. I think the last time I checked, they were at like they crossed 11,000. What are they at right now? Because I put more money in it not too long ago. But like it's coming back up. It's on the upswing, crypto in general. So yeah, it's at 11,897 right now as we speak. 10:44 p.m. on a Thursday. So it's got some strength, and there's even cryptocurrencies that peg themselves to U.S. dollars too. So like if they really want like a short deal, they can go for that. Go for those. That's what I would do.
so what that should be their national currency,
But
just crypto.
well, I mean, I think all of the crypto nuts out there would be dying for like like a nationalized experiment into cryptocurrency. Like a couple countries are thinking about creating
Doesn't that
cryptocurrencies.
defeat the purpose of the crypto
Mm,
currency though?
not
So
exactly.
you
I
don't
mean,
want it tied to, you don't want it to be a national.
yeah, yeah, totally. But like, it's more about the blockchain itself and like utilizing the technology rather than like who is ministering or whatever. Of course, the true crypto nut would probably. We should get Phil on to ask him what his opinions are on it, on whether or not Lebanon should use crypto. But I just think the fact that it's not centralized there, the fact that it can be accessed anywhere where you have an internet connection, which Lebanon has, right? And the fact that there are cryptocurrencies that are fairly stable, so stable coins could be utilized. I think that would be a much better route than going down the route of trying to switch your entire currency, your fiat currency system to dollars, and still having the corrupt banks, because those banks were a Ponzi scheme, as you pointed out, right? Why would people trust putting their money, their now dollars, into this banking system? Right? They're just going to do the same shit, or they're going to use it to pay off their debts. So like, unless you want to sit on thousands of dollars under your mattress, I don't really think that's a good idea.
Will they get robbed?
Yeah, totally.
I mean, you would get robbed
Yeah.
if you had thousands of dollars in your mattress right now in Lebanon.
Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming that you would get held up at gunpoint and that money would be taken
Probably.
because people are
They're
eating out the
desperate.
trash
Yeah, they're fucking
and
desperate
desperate.
right now. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Um, so it's really bad, and I don't know what's going to happen. A lot of people, there's a lot of analysts who are predicting some sort of civil war, mainly because
I really hope not. Honestly, I hope they figure out a way to do it that's not like fucking ridiculous violence. You know, that they don't, as broken as their system is and as broken as like their state and their government is, I really just hope they figure out like a peaceful way to deal with it, because that would suck.
if they
Also, because I don't want to have to, I don't want fucking Joe Biden to be like, we gotta go into Lebanon and like help out our brethren over there and shit. Like no, no.
put peacekeeping forces there,
Mm-hmm. To arm the moderate Hezbollah rebels, right?
it wouldn't be arming the Hezbollah rebels. They'd be arming the Al Qaeda types that they were there. That would be there.
Yep.
Um, they're pretty anti Hezbollah, but it would be. I mean, what would happen is that they, if there was a total breakdown and there was a power vacuum that was created, I don't. First of all, I don't think any party in Lebanon is interested in fighting a civil war right now. None of them. None of the powers that be, at the very least, are interested in having a civil war. Um, but what's the power if the government ceases to exist? What is the power vacuum that's formed to create a new government? And will that new government be a chauvinistic type government that will issue out the same sort of ethnic or religious nepotism that's issued out in a lot of those countries? So that would be the causes if they were internal. I mean, they could just be external causes where someone starts funding rebels to go break shit and cause strife.
I mean, that's entirely possible too. I mean, that Lebanon has quite a bit of Hezbollah in it, right? So we have Iranian influence, and we also have the opposite end of the spectrum there too. Israel and the United States, and by proxy, a whole lot of other actors, and would prefer to get rid of Hezbollah. So there is some of that tension in the region, in that country specifically. I wouldn't rule out some external forces fucking around.
So it's interesting. And a couple days, because Israel and Hezbollah, they've been over the past few months, they've been butting heads, putting forces on the border and all of that.
Right.
There's been a lot of articles coming out of like Haaretz in the Jerusalem Times saying that, Hezbollah is not going to want to strike right now because they're going under a lot of turnover, and a lot of them have been blaming Hezbollah on the bomb somehow. I don't know how they're doing it, but essentially they're like, Hezbollah is part of this government, therefore the explosion is their fault.
I mean,
they're a political party, therefore it's their fault.
Maybe
there is a tribunal. I mean, it's a stretch to point the finger at one political party for.
I mean, I think the explosion was, the culpability does lie on the government, but it's like not all the government is Hezbollah, so just because you're Hezbollah doesn't mean you caused the bomb. Government caused the explosion.
Well, there's a tribunal of the guys who allegedly killed Hariri, the prime minister of Lebanon, the prime minister of Lebanon, not the
former,
his son, the one in the early his father, who was assassinated back in 2005. And there's a tribunal.
It was 2006.
2006. There was a tribunal that was going to issue out the verdict if the 4 Hezbollah guys who were convicted were the assailants in the assassination. And I think that should be coming out tomorrow, the verdict, because it was pushed back. But it's an interesting thing because that whole episode, it's not even really confirmed that it was Hezbollah or not who did that.
Mm-hmm.
Because there was a lot of Al-Qaeda. There was an Al-Qaeda cell that confessed to the murder of Hariri,
Mm-hmm.
but they recanted their confessions.
Mm.
They claim that they were tortured. That's why they confessed. But there is transcripts that were published by newspapers in Lebanon that showed that that there was no torture during the coercion, and that Al Qaeda had ordered the assassination. But Hezbollah was stuck with the blame, and Hezbollah is blamed for a lot of attacks that like took place before the organization even existed. Like
Right.
Hezbollah came to existence in 1985, and they're blamed for the suicide truck bombing in '83 of the U.S. Embassy, and they're also blamed for the '84 attack on the U.S. Embassy in Beirut. That was a year prior to Hezbollah's existence. They say it was like the precursor groups to Hezbollah. Like,
Mm.
well, the people who became Hezbollah were the people who were targeted, who were in targets of that. But there's like a lot of pressure on Hezbollah because they're deeply funded by Iran.
Right.
That there's kind of a political agenda to
I mean, they're
blame
recognized.
them on stuff.
They.
Like the Khobar Towers attack
Mhm.
too.
Yeah.
Hezbollah was blamed on the Khobar Towers attack
Right.
when we know that the people who did it were Bin Ladenites
Right.
in Saudi Arabia. Like,
Right.
so there's a lot of
Different
like,
set of crazies. You know.
yeah, it's like a lot of terrorist attacks are pointed their way, and I'm sure. I mean,
Well, let's
I
not be
want to take
Hezbollah
some stuff. I
apologists.
want
Like,
to
I'm
take
sure
some
that they're
stuff at
not
face
great.
value.
You know,
I
Hezbollah
want to
isn't
take
a
some.
great organization, but I see what you're
Yeah,
saying.
yeah, I want to take some of the stuff at face value. Like, but there's a lot of questionable accusations against some of the attacks, which just make you question all their other ones that they may have done.
Mm-hmm.
So Gareth Porter, who's an investigative journalist, he released this article a couple of weeks ago, and on the Gray Zone, Max Blumenthal's um, website, saying that the AMAI bombing in Argentina, which was a terrible, terrible terrorist attack that took place. It was, the largest terrorist attack in the Western Hemisphere before 9/11, where Jewish Community Center in Buenos Aires was bombed. There was a suicide bomb in it, and it killed 85 people.
Mm-hmm.
And it was blamed on Hezbollah. So '96. Gareth Porter just released an article saying that he was going through like a Spanish newspapers, and a lot of people thought it was it was a Nazi group. It was like a neo-Nazi group who did it there.
But it got
And
pinned on Hezbollah.
Hezbollah was a suspect there. But in that community in Buenos Aires, there was like a lot of former Nazi types there
Yep.
from World War II, and
Yep.
there was just a really big. It was just very, very anti-Semitic over there, and that they were suspects as well. But the U.S. pressured them to put the blame on Hezbollah. I don't know the full validity of it. Gareth Porter is a pretty reliable journalist to me, but because I had never heard that story before.
Yeah,
But,
I mean, it's troubling because the U.S. did designate Hezbollah as a foreign terrorist organization in '97, and this is well after the 83, 84 bombings of the U.S. embassy, and they're recognized in 18 countries as well as the Arab League and the European Union as a terrorist organization.
But their military wing are recognized as terrorist groups. Their
Right,
political wing isn't.
right, exactly. But it's hard to parse the two,
Well, you can't
because
parse the
there's
two in
crossover,
reality.
like
But the EU recognizes the terrorist wing. I mean, excuse me,
the
the military wing as a
yeah.
terrorist organization,
Mhm.
but they don't recognize the political wing as a terrorist organization.
Right, but there's a lot of
So,
crossover, right? So people
well, there is
from
crossover. They're the same fucking
yeah.
organization.
Well, what I'm saying is like
Like
the same individuals who were once in the
it's the
military
same
wing.
individuals.
Right, exactly. That's
It's the
what I'm
same
saying.
people.
There's crossover.
It's the same group.
There's crossover.
Like Nasrallah is meeting with. He was meeting with General Soleimani.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
they were discussing like military stuff, like they
Yeah.
were patrons. Like you see where Soleimani used to go, and like all the people he used to meet with. There's pictures
Right.
with him with basically all with the entire political wing of Hezbollah,
Mm-hmm.
um, essentially any like militia type
Right.
who's a Shia.
Right.
He's there. He's worked with them. I mean, that's why
That's
Israel
kind of the
wanted him
trouble.
dead
That's
so
kind of the
bad.
trouble, like
Israel wanted him dead so bad. I think mainly because
who,
um,
Nasrallah or Soleimani?
Soleimani,
Hmm.
because he had so many alliances, and I think a lot of the alliances only he like kind of like they were in his head type of thing. He was like Otto von Bismarck, where like a lot of the stuff that he had in his mind was just in his head, and
Mm-hmm.
not saying it like it was just they were so complex. A lot of these alliances that he made that as like removing him would fracture those because they weren't necessarily on paper. They were handshake deals and stuff like that, all from
Right.
him.
Right.
I think that was like why they were so anxious to get him.
And what's do we know the percentage of influence, or at least the roundabout influence that Hezbollah has in the Lebanese government? Like what their political wing? Like what's the breakdown there? Like how much power do they have?
They're the most powerful political party in Lebanon right now.
And they're the ones doing the Ponzi scheme.
No, that was that Ponzi scheme. They've recently just gained the majority in the parliament. That
Hmm.
Ponzi scheme's been going on for years. But they're part of it. Like they're all part of the problem. Like I'm not pro Hezbollah, obviously.
Yeah,
They're all just bully political organizations that essentially are
bullies.
bullies. Yeah, but Hezbollah has popularity across uh, not just the Shia organizations, not just Shias, but Sunnis and Christians as well,
Mm-hmm.
because they resist Israel, and they're the only. There's no army in Lebanon. Like the army of Lebanon is Hezbollah.
Mm-hmm.
They are the Lebanese army is
Right.
Hezbollah.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So they have popularity in that front, and I mean they're a populist movement at this time. They're
Tough, man. Tough.
but we're at an hour and 14 minutes. I gotta wake up early,
You got a
as
long
I
journey
mentioned.
ahead of you.
I have a long journey. I have a long journey. Um, so unless you have anything that you want to say before we peace,
I don't think so, man. Um, be safe. Wear a mask. Mask it or casket, Karen.
mask or white Sharia,
White Sharia.
white Sharia. Um, yeah, thanks for joining us for another episode of Bro History. Make sure that you subscribe to the channel if you're watching on YouTube. If you're listening via iTunes or Apple Podcast, rate and review the podcast. It is an extremely helpful way to help us grow. We just got a bunch recently, so keep them coming. If you haven't, if you've listened to this show more than like once or twice, it's one of your favorite shows that you listen to. So just rate the podcast 5 stars and help us grow. And we will see you next week.
Peace.